my battery went dead for the first class. Because did I bring an extension cord? No. Why would I do that? Except that every week I wish I had an extension cord.
But one day
A slow learner. Wow. This past week, I gave you a poem by Walt Whitman, the beginning of the Song of Myself.
Maggie's not here, but you've given her a poem.
But can you remind me, jog my memory, did I also give you some poems by Poe?
Yeah, you gave The Raven.
Okay. And I gave you El Dorado and Alone, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
I would love, you've been promoted.
This one?
Yeah, I'll take everything.
And then don't forget the one about the whale sighting.
Oh, yeah. I'm probably not going to look at that. I just gave you that as a sort of a background on what life was like in New England and the whaling industry. I'm not going to read The Raven to you. How many of you had never read The Raven before?
I had listened to it.
Oh, well, that still counts.
I've never read it, but I've heard parts of it.
It's very, how would you describe the mood of The Raven? The
Calm.
feeling?
Deathly.
Deathly. You said calm. In what way do you feel calm?
I don't know. The raven in the poem just flew in and sat up on the bus, and you have the main persona, and yelling at the crow, asking it questions, and then the raven's just kind of calmly responding.
Oh, the raven is the calm. Here, this is hideous. I'm moving this. So the raven responds calmly, no matter what the main character, whoever that is, seems to be feeling. Does he remain calm? Would you say the main character remains calm?
I'd say he gets a little frantic.
He's a little frantic at the end, doesn't he? What makes him so frantic? What is it that the raven is doing that's freaking him out or ticking him off?
Talking.
Well, talking would do it. Just that. But the fact that he keeps saying nevermore, what's nevermore going to happen?
And I could be wrong about this, but he'll never see his wife's
Lenore.
Lenore.
Lenore. Yeah, he says, when the bird first talks, he's not super freaked out. He's just like, oh, well, that's cool. Maybe he belonged to some guys, like he
run screaming, because
well,
I'd be like, this bird's possessed.
He
I
thinks
just would run away.
he thinks maybe it was trained, like a parrot. I don't know if you train ravens like parrots. Don't know. But he says, yes, he says, doubtless what it utters is its only stock and store. This is the only thing it's learned to say. Caught from some unhappy master whom unmerciful disaster followed faster till his song's one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore of never, nevermore. So he belonged to some poor guy who his life fell apart and he lost everything, and all he would just say, oh, nevermore will I be happy, nevermore will I have joy. And the bird just learned that word from him. So at first he says this, but then the bird starts to seem like it's answering him, because he says, he's just checking out the bird. This is kind of interesting. But then he looks, and he's checking out the bird, and the light is falling on him, and he says, this and more I set divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er. But whose velvet violet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, she shall press, nevermore. Lenore's never going to be there, resting her head on that couch. And then he starts to think about it. He keeps saying nevermore. He means Lenore. He means Lenore. And this is the point at which he starts getting frantic, because then he starts to ask it a question. He says, is there balm in Gilead? tell me, I implore. It's a biblical reference. Gilead was known for its healing salve. And in the Old Testament, it talks about getting balm from Gilead. And he's asking, is there any hope for my misery? And right on cue, the bird says, nevermore. Which
That's
starts
what I
to
was
freak
kind
him
of
out.
saying with the Deathly is that
Yes.
the guy gets more emotional, yet the raven stays the same and just keeps to it. And it's almost like no matter how angry the guy gets, what happened, that his wife is dead, will never change, and it will
Yes.
just keep on repeating.
And the bird doesn't care.
And
That's kind of ominous in a sense. It's like,
A delusional guy thinking
it's like
that-
this guy is super
It's like
sad and
the
the
indifference.
bird is just sitting there and completely indifferent to it.
The indifference of the mindless bird almost represents the indifference of the past that cannot be changed.
and even the indifference of the world to his plight, right? Because the last stanza, which is the creepiest in my opinion, and the raven never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. It doesn't leave. How long ago did this happen? And then I start to wonder, does this thing even exist in reality? Is he hallucinating? Because birds don't just fly into your room and just stay there for days without food or water. And his soul
Demon.
lies floating on the floor. Maybe so.
I mean, that's what
Maybe
I was,
so.
I mean, if a bird that wasn't a parrot came up to you and started talking to you, I would just think demon.
He even calls it, where is that? He does say, thing of evil, whether tempter sent, or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore. But I feel like he calls it like a demon's that is sleeping. I remember that line. He calls it coming from the night's Plutonian shore. Pluto is Hades, god of the underworld.
Oh.
So he demonic, perhaps. He tells it to get back there
Go away.
to the night's Plutonian shore.
Because isn't the crow supposed to be a symbol of death? Because
It's a raven,
oh, right.
but I mean certainly the black color of
Yeah.
the
I
raven.
mean, it just
A color of
would be very
mourning.
uncomfortable and creepy. Especially how it stayed there watching him. It's just, I'd say demonic.
Unnerving.
I mean,
To
it
say
would
the
be
very
very
least,
unnerving.
unnerving, indeed.
It's
Um,
like the,
Blackbirds are creepy.
yeah, just from a distance they're creepy, let alone,
Like if a
Like,
bird is
right there.
any color other than black, or like just has any markings that aren't black on it, it's not creepy at all.
Okay,
Probably because their eyes are black as well, and so you can't see their eyes. It's like,
perhaps.
According to Roman mythology, ravens used to be white.
Yes. Is that one of
Evolution.
Ovid's stories? One of the changes? I can't
Murder of
remember.
Ravens.
It was in the same book, but I think it was like one that the author wrote himself.
Oh, okay. So El Dorado. Are we all familiar with what El Dorado is? The lost city of gold that guys were checking out the whole Southwest United States for years.
and doesn't exist.
Gaily bedight, a gallant knight in sunshine and in shadow had journeyed long singing a song in search of El Dorado. But he grew old, this knight so bold, and o'er his heart a shadow fell as he found no spot of ground that looked like El Dorado. And as his strength failed him at length, he met a pilgrim shadow. Shadow, said he, where can it be, this land of El Dorado? Over the mountains of the moon, down the valley of the shadow, ride boldly ride, the shade replied, if you seek for El Dorado. And I ask you again, what kind of mood how does this poem make you feel?
It's like disappointing.
Okay,
It's like, I missed it.
he can't find it. He can't find it. And he meets a pilgrim shadow. What's up with that? Not a real pilgrim? A shadow, a shade. That doesn't seem good. It sounds ghostly, doesn't it? And where does it tell him to look? over the mountains of the moon. Is he going there anytime soon? No.
He's like, it doesn't exist.
Down the valley of the shadow. What does that make you think of?
Valley of the shadow of death.
Death.
Mhm.
Ride, boldly ride, the shade replied, if you seek for El Dorado.
Yeah, no, sounds like go to your death, you'll find him.
Like maybe not till heaven,
Maybe
Like,
not even there.
maybe not even there, like forget it. Your quest and a gallant knight, when he started out, he was a gallant knight and then he grew old. How long has he been searching for this? Years? Decades?
His life.
His whole life, and then finally, forget it. You're never going to find that. Yeah, it is depressing. It's just this hopelessness. If I had to do the Raven and El Dorado, hopeless. There is no hope here. It's very depressing. Well, I told you, and maybe you know this, Poe had a rather depressing life. And not that everything Poe writes is autobiographical, all right? He's an artist creating poetry, creating short stories. They're not necessarily about him. But don't you think that what you go through in life must come out in your art? Don't you think if you've had
that's the
sad...
only thing you've experienced, so therefore it'd be kind of the same logic. You can't write with words that you've never heard of before.
Write what you know.
You write what you know. The last poem, I would say this is probably my favorite poem, partly because I have a CD for children that's poetry set to music, and El Dorado and Alone are both on there. I particularly like the version of Alone set to music that's on there. And I kind of wonder if this one is autobiographical. If this is Poe speaking of himself. He says, "From childhood's hour, I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source I have not taken my sorrow. I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone. And all I loved alone." Always he's been different. He's perceived himself as different. The things that, everybody else gets all excited about, 4th of July fireworks, and not me. Everyone else gets all upset about, something that you get upset about. Not me. The same things don't move me. I'm different than other people. And then he goes on. Then in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn from every depth of good and ill the mystery which binds me still. From the torrent or the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in its autumn tint of gold, from the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm, and the cloud that took the form, when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon in my view. You know how you sit and the clouds are white and fluffy and you make pictures out of them? And usually it's like fluffy animals and things. Demons for him. That's what he sees in the clouds.
That's just kind of terrifying. Maybe the guy's possessed.
It's kind of terrifying.
I mean, that's
Maybe
just,
he's the Raven.
Yes.
I mean, he doesn't say that he's a person, so he could be the Raven.
Don't know. But I don't know. For some reason it resonates with me, this idea of feeling like you're not like other people. Do you do not have to answer this. You can only answer this in your mind if you don't want to answer it publicly. Do you ever feel like there's nobody else quite like you, like people don't understand?
All the time.
Or yet to meet.
And do you know what I suspect? Maybe we all feel that way, or most of us, but we don't want to admit it. Now, there are things that the majority of people like. Like there's a majority consensus on popularity of certain things. But if you're that sort of person, like you don't like the same things. You don't find your joy and sorrow from the same things. You just really don't feel like you fit in. And I think maybe the dirty secret of humanity is maybe we all feel alone. do you know what, in our own ways. Maybe not like Poe or whoever the fictional narrator of Alone is. Maybe it's not him.
Maybe we just have our own, like, there's something that we do or think about that nobody else that we feel like does that. Yep.
But we think everybody else out there is all, like, has a consensus. They all have it together. And we're the ones left on the outside. But maybe everybody thinks they're the one left on the outside. I don't know.
It's kind of like a weird paradox in a sense. It's like everyone thinks they're left out because everyone else has it together, but everyone thinks that.
Yes.
They just put on a show.
They just put on a show.
It's like you put on a show when you're around people to say, hey, look, I have it all together. But then when you're by yourself, you realize you don't.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody thinks that way.
Mm-hmm. Because no one wants to let the secret out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever think about the fact that, sometimes I think about this, but I can't know what it's like to be anybody but me. I can't really know any other person. I mean, I can know about them. I know my children. I mean, obviously, you would think that I know them better than I know any other human beings, but yet I don't know what it's like to be them. I don't know what it's like inside your heads, and you don't know what it's like inside mine, and we can't ever go there. It's kind of sad. I like to think that heaven will be C.S. Lewis, I think, wrote once about this. Might have been C.S. Lewis or Peter Kraft. He was speculating on heaven, you know. What if we get to know what it's like to be each other a little bit? Wouldn't that be cool?
But then, it would be cool, but then I feel like then we could get jealous of,
Yeah, except we won't be able to. We'll be able to just appreciate, oh, that's what it's like for you.
Maybe
That's what it feels like for you. Let me show you what it feels like for me.
that's, in a sense, that's one reason why I guess God has said, no, you can't learn what it's like to be
No.
someone else because then you might get jealous.
Maybe so. Maybe
Yes.
here we can't handle it.
Yeah, he's keeping us from being jealous.
Which kind of takes us to Mr. Walt Whitman and his beginning of his very, very long Song of Myself.
There's one situation where I can think that you might be able to get into another person's mind if you're twins.
They do seem to
Separated
have
twins.
a mental connection that I don't think any of us can doubt, because there's too many stories of, like you said, separated twins following very similar.
they follow very
Lives.
similar lifestyles or complete opposite lifestyles.
No, I'm talking like one of those movies where the twins are separated, but then they find each other and like
Oh.
swap parents.
Isn't that the
Like-
Parent Trap?
I think maybe.
Yeah. I was thinking Escape from Witch
I-
Mountain, but they're aliens. Okay, that's kind of old. Maybe you guys don't know about Escape from Witch Mountain.
I seen the new one.
Oh, okay. I didn't know there was a new one. So, what? This is not a trick question. What is Walt Whitman basically talking about?
Himself.
Himself. Okay. This is not a trick question. But is it only himself? He brings in houses and rooms are full of perfumes. I breathe the fragrance. He talks about the smoke of his own breath. He talks about, mostly himself.
He talks
If you
about
read the whole thing, he talks about other groups of people. But go ahead, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
himself and like the things he likes.
Okay.
So kind of himself, but I mean not really.
What do you think of this poem?
I could probably write something like it.
He's got a big ego.
Okay, here, I'm sliding these to you. I don't know what's gonna happen, but, okay, well. I was wondering, in general, we say big ego, or we say, if you devote a humongous poem to yourself, we might think that's a little odd, at the very least. But can you think of a way that Song of Myself could be a Christian response in any way?
All the things that he has to be thankful for, all the things that he likes, all the things that he has to be thankful for from God.
Okay.
I don't know if he mentions God in there though, but he mentions all the things that he likes, and if it was from a Christian point of view, it's all the things that he could be thankful for.
Okay, so thankfulness. Anything else about a poem celebrating yourself that could be a Christian response?
He could point his life towards God, which I mean is pretty much the chief end of man.
Okay.
It's like to point others towards Christ. So.
But he doesn't. So is there any way that this poem that we have in our hands, which I realize you just read the first part of, could be an actual Christian response to your life?
You mean unaltered?
Yes.
Oh.
Celebrating life itself
Okay.
and the individuality of myself
Okay.
compared to other people.
Because what is there anyone like you?
Tons of people who probably are interested in the same subjects, but there's nobody exactly like me.
There is no other you. There is no other you. From the
Maybe-
eternity, the history of the world, to the end of time, there will be no other you. And that's on purpose. And I find that pretty amazing. And you know what? There's a reason that you're you. You have a purpose, like a piece of a puzzle that only that one piece will fit. That's you. What your place is, I don't know. I'm still working on my place. Maybe we never know fully until we get to heaven, you know? But because my first response to Walt Whitman is, like you said, whoa, buddy, you need to just think about somebody else for a little while. But then I think, you know what, though? Now, if I only spent all my time saying, I'm so wonderful because God made me unique, and that would be not a good idea. But is it a good idea to say, oh, I'm nothing special at all? I'm not, there's nothing wonderful about me.
Like the alone poem?
Yeah. I don't know that that's a Christian response either. Do you know what I mean? God made me in a certain way. So anyway, that's my attempt to put a Christian spin on Walt Whitman. However, Walt Whitman was not a Christian as far as we could tell, or what we would call an Orthodox Christian. Any Christian group that would subscribe to the Nicene Creed. All right? Like God the Father, Jesus is his Son, fully God, fully man, born of her, all, like any Christian group that would subscribe to that. Walt Whitman was not one of those. Mm-hmm. He lived at the same time and in the same area as guys like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Thoreau and Louise May Alcott's dad, Bronson Alcott, who was kind of out there. The Transcendentalists. Have you heard? Like some of you have read some Emerson, right? Self-reliance. See, I left these out because it said in Classical Conversations that that's stuff that you guys read, and then I left them out on purpose. Yeah, I'm not going to do that again.
Well, I'm in like challenge one now, so I haven't read.
Well, but I know, but I knew it was a mixed group, so some of you would have. But anyway.
We've read 2 more years of books.
Yes, but they were not Orthodox Christians. They were spiritual. You ever heard people like, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual? I don't know what that means, but some spirits are not spirits you want to deal with. I don't know what it means to just be spiritual. But they were spiritual, and the Unitarian Church, if you're familiar, they're a big thing. Everybody gets saved. Like there's no hell and everybody gets saved. And it's kind of New Agey, but before the New Age. This was the group of thinkers in New England at that time. And they influenced Walt Whitman, and Walt Whitman influenced them. So no, those things you said, if we added to Walt Whitman's poem, if he acknowledged God as his creator, he does not. Or not the God we would know. Like it might be some cosmic force. Do you know what I mean? But not the God of Scripture. But yet, maybe he still has something to teach me. Maybe looking at myself as a unique creation of God. And it's what an incredible thing he made.
There are some
I'm incredible, and so are you. You know, to have that vision. Maybe that's not a bad thing.
There are some atheists who are like brilliant and have great morals, and they're awesome. They just don't know or don't believe that it comes from God.
Yes. And that doesn't change the truth, does it? That it does come from God, whether they acknowledge it or not. one of my problems with Walt Whitman, and maybe you guys can give me some feedback on this, I really don't like free verse. You know, Walt Whitman has no meter or rhyme or structure necessarily. Like, oh, Captain, my Captain, it did.
It's just like writing a book.
Yeah, it's just sort of like rambling to me. And I have a real stumbling block appreciating it because I know he didn't just randomly choose his words. Some people today, I think, do write poetry that's just randomly, or, you know, just like
Hey, Google,
vomit up your feelings on a
Google,
page.
give me 10 random words.
Yeah, no, that's not poetry. But I don't think Walt Whitman falls in that category. Anyway, one of my students on Tuesday, his mom really likes Walt Whitman, and I teased him that she's trying to bring me over to the dark side. Anyway, I said, okay, I will get his big book called Leaves of Grass, his collection of poetry. Maybe this summer I will get, a beverage, and I will sit on my deck and I will read Leaves of Grass, and I will attempt to appreciate the nuances of Walt Whitman. But I don't have a lot of hope.
It's kind of like hymns and stuff that are supposed to have like a certain meter and a rhyme versus rap, which doesn't really.
Amen.
Yeah, I love the hymns we sing in our church. It's the where it's like this one rhymes with the first one rhymes with the third one, and the second rhymes with the fourth one.
A-B, A-B.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have a new poem, one poem. You had a boatload of poetry this week. You did one poem, one page. It is the most famous poem by Matthew Arnold, who also was in this time period of a lot of religious doubt. So just follow the generations for me for a minute. In the mid-1700s in France, we had a crop of people who were the Enlightenment thinkers. They were enlightened because they realized that we should just use our reason and not all this religion revelation from God stuff. Okay? And they wrote a series of books called the Encyclopedia. It was the original encyclopedia. But the entries all had a spin on them. Like, many of them had an atheistic spin. I think you know what I mean by that. You know, it wasn't just an unbiased look at a topic. It always had a dig in it. And so we have this generation. Then think about it. Next generation, the French Revolution. It's filtered down to the common people to the point where they can put a goddess of reason in Notre Dame Cathedral and stuff like that and drive out the clergy. Right? So then follow another generation, and these Enlightenment ideas are spreading through Europe. All right, so now we're in the early 1800s. Then another generation passes, and it finally makes it to America. Does that make sense? Like, ideas don't suddenly, just like that, spread throughout a population, except it happens more now because we can internet.
Yeah.
But in times past, it takes several generations. So you've got to watch it because it looks harmless. Like, oh, there's just a few cranks out there making this encyclopedia, and like nobody's going to go for that. And you go 3 or 4 generations later, and this idea has spread of doubt. And so obviously that intro tells you that you are probably going to encounter some sort of religious doubt in Matthew Arnold. I forgot to look this up again, but I think that he was an Anglican priest. That he was English and he was an Anglican priest who obviously was having a faith crisis later in life. That's all I want to say about this poem, because I want you to read it. The only thing I want to say, here, I've got an extra for me. In the second stanza, you see it says, Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean. Sophocles. Who is Sophocles? Next year, you're going to read Sophocles if you're my student in this class. Sophocles is a Greek playwright. He's the one who wrote the plays about, his most Oedipus. The guy who was destined to kill his dad and marry his mom.
That's messed up.
That's messed up.
Kind of.
And it's,
Back to the Future.
yeah, yeah, Back to the Future gone very bad. And so it's all about, he was fated. And the thing is, everything he tried to do to escape it, that's the stuff that made it happen. He tried to make it not happen, but the very act of trying to make it not happen is the thing that made it happen. Oh, it's brutal. And so when you read that, Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean, which is the sea by Greece. What is Sophocles hearing? He's hearing fate, he's hearing doom, he's hearing inescapable shipwreck of your life. All right, enough said. So spend a week with Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach. By the way, does anybody know where Dover is?
Where's what?
Dover?
Dover, Delaware?
No, that's
Dover
true.
Books?
Dover Beach, Dover,
Oh, yeah.
as in the, what is,
Figure where it's at.
what is notable at Dover? The blank blank of Dover. I'm fishing for this. The White Cliffs, the White Cliffs of Dover. Dover is in southeast England, and that shoreline has sharp cliffs that rise up out of the sea, and they're all white chalk. And so as you approach England, there's these white cliffs, the White
My
Cliffs of
dad,
Dover.
when he went to Austria, he ended up going to England too, and he saw those because
Cool.
he wanted to. He took pictures of them, and it literally just looks like silk. Like it's weird.
It's very bright. It's very weird.
He ended up taking some, which is probably illegal, but
Yeah, I got a rooftop from Harrods Palace. I don't judge. Everybody takes, you just see, like everybody visits and they take a little vial of it and the coastline just starts moving back and the English are wondering what's happening to our country.
Evolutionists say it's shrinking.
It's shrinking.
It's shrinking. No, it's tourists.
The waters are rising.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah,
That's it. It's global warming. It's really tourists. Okay. We started Moby Dick. Now, I looked in your book last time. Who has the two beginning parts called the extracts and the etymology? You haven't.
The etymology,
Of
at
them,
least.
but
I've
not
heard-
the extracts. Do you have a bunch
heard
of
about the
quotes?
extracts.
There are a bunch of quotes?
Yes.
Okay, that's the extracts. Okay. It is unfortunate that many of your books don't have that. So just in case you don't, because I think yours is just like, oh, maybe not. Do you have a thing at the beginning, like where it's just
it just goes straight to the introduction.
just to looming? Okay. Well, I mean, this would be after the introduction, because we're not reading the introduction, because that's not written by Melville.
It'd be right before chapter 1.
Yeah, it'd be right before chapter 1.
These chapters are really
Oh, I
short in
think-
Yes.
comparison to Emma.
Oh, it's
Yes.
The
extract right
chapters
there.
in
So
and
don't.
even the chapters
Yeah,
in
there is a
Emma were
little,
pretty
yeah,
short.
It does have the etymology
Okay.
right
but-
there.
Okay, so the very beginning of this book, so picture this, it's 1851, this book is hot off the presses, I'm going to get the latest book by Herman Melville, oh, I'm so excited. And I open it up, and the first thing I see, etymology, supplied by a late consumptive usher to a grammar school. Consumption is tuberculosis. An old, sick guy working in a school put this together. Great, what the heck am I reading here? And so I now have a list of how to say whale in all these different languages. Okay, and I think that's odd, to say the
Wow.
least. Okay, including like languages I don't even know. We have Fiji, which is obviously the Fiji Islands, and then something called Aromangoan, which looks exactly like the Fiji. And I ask myself, why is this here? I don't know. I'm just going to have to tuck it away. And next, I see supplied by a sub-librarian, a poor grubworm of a devil of a sub-sub appears to have gone through the long Vaticans and street stalls of the earth, picking up whatever random allusions to whales he could find in any book whatsoever. And I have pages of starting with, and God created great whales. And we have Leviathan in Job. We have, now the Lord prepared a great fish to swallow Jonah. We have from Hamlet. We have French philosophers. We have from John Bunyan. Like, what?
Okay.
And it goes on. I'm doing it. This is still the extracts. And again, it makes you wonder, what is this book about?
It's about whales.
It's about whales. It's obviously about whales because we have gone to all the trouble of telling you how to say the word whale in all these languages, and every reference to whales that he could find in any piece of literature. Okay. And you ever watch movies where you just kind of, for the first 15 minutes, like Inception is like this, okay? Tenet is a little bit like this too. Christopher Nolan does this. You don't know what the heck's going on.
Yeah,
And you just have to ride it out. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know, but
Yeah.
if I just shut up and watch, I'm going to understand. And then you watch it with that person. I don't understand. What are they doing? Why are they doing that? And you're just like,
What's really annoying
I'm
is,
that person.
what's
Let it
really
go.
annoying is they ask that and they're like, oh, okay, and then they go back to looking on their phone and don't pay attention,
Oh.
and then they
Oh,
look
no,
up and
that's-
say, what just happened?
no, I would
It's
not
like-
even answer that person.
That would be my brother Oren.
You watch the movie or you don't watch the movie. Anyway.
I watched the movie.
But-
just asked
But you know,
if he doesn't
sometimes you
wanna
have
come.
to just sort of say, I don't understand, but if I stick with it long enough, I think I will start to understand. I'm going to propose to you that the etymology in the extracts, well, I don't, why is this here? Well, maybe it's like the beginning of Inception, and we just have to wait. And then we meet our character. Okay, chapter 1 is called Loomings. Explain to me, what does looming mean? What?
All I can think of is a really dark room with like a lamp up top of as its
Yeah.
only
I know,
light
that's what
source.
it sounds like.
Okay.
At least that's a picture in my mind.
Like, can you use looming in a sentence?
The looming cliff.
The-
Okay.
The storm was looming over
Okay,
the.
so what's it doing? It's like hovering over you in a sort of,
Frankenstein's
Help me, I'm
monster.
about to get crushed.
yeah, in like a
Negative
dangerous
way.
way, like a threatening way.
Frankenstein's
Right?
monster hovering over your shoulder.
He's looming over me, yes. Okay, so looming. What else does loom mean
It's
though?
taller than you, but it looks like it's going to fall on top
Okay,
of you.
okay, yes, kind of hovering over me and,
So we're gonna be talking
and
about
threatening me.
synonyms to the word loom. We
Okay.
can just talk about the loom as a whole, like the making of rugs and such.
Okay, a loom is also a place where people weave stuff.
More or
who-
less the object that
who-
weaves.
Yes. Who weaves? I don't know how to ask this question and get the answer I want. What famous trio does a lot of weaving mythologically?
The fate.
The fate.
The Fates. What do they weave?
The loom of fate.
Yes, which is for you.
Lives.
What does that mean for you? Lives. Your life.
They
So it's
control your
fate
life.
of, yes, they
So I
control your
saw
life.
About that, it's actually about the loom of fate. So there's this show on Netflix. It's called DC's Legends of Tomorrow.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
So,
Just
Yes.
let him say. Let him
I want
say.
you to say it, yes.
No, Carl, just let him say.
Okay, so towards kind of like the end, there's this guy that comes into play. His name's John Constantine, and there's one of the fates, the youngest one, because there's only 3.
Mm-hmm.
The youngest one, she has like these, it's shape-shifting powers,
Awesome.
and so
You
I
wouldn't
mean,
want.
they don't age unless
Right.
they become their true selves. That's why nobody can see their true selves, because when they become their true selves, they're so old that it's kind of like Medusa. They either like turn to stone or they just like they're so bright.
Okay, sounds
Thanos.
interesting.
That's completely different.
Well, the snapping of
But-
Thanos
Here,
and
shh,
turning
let him
back.
tell his story.
And so then they started talking about this thing called the Loom of Fate, and I'm like, what are they talking about? And they actually showed like, obviously it's probably not a real Loom of Fate, but I mean, they showed like strings like coming out of it, and if they took one out, that belonged to the life of a person, and they would
Awesome.
just like disappear. And then where John Constantine came from. It was like the underworld where there's like demons and stuff, and they had coins of people's names on them, and they could take one side off and they could turn these wheels that would determine whether how much time they had left or not. So they could turn it back and say, oh, they have a lot more time, or they can turn it to like 30 minutes from now and they could die in 30 minutes.
Cool.
So the youngest one ended up like destroying the Loom of Fate and hiding it in like a bunch of different places in different times because they were time travelers. So then the older sisters, one of the older sisters came to try to find it and to try to kill her because she betrayed them. And then the big older sister came and it just got crazy.
So you are familiar with the Loom of Fate?
Yes.
The idea of the sisters weaving people's fates. And I know Clotho and Atropos, and I can't remember the third one's name, but Atropos is the one that cuts one of them spins it out, one of them measures it, and one of them cuts it.
Aren't they in Hercules, the movie?
Yeah, but they have them confused with the other people that share one eye, and that's not the same. It's not the same. There's two, they've melded two different groups of ladies. There's another group of ladies that share one eye.
Same thing with Percy Jackson.
Okay, so
That's a great book.
Melville has called, I know, so many of my students, like, that's their mythological Bible. Like, well, Percy Jackson didn't do it that way.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
okay, Nick's on Percy
Susan is
Jackson.
so much like that.
Loomings. So we have two ideas. Some danger is hovering, and fate or destiny is being woven out. And then we have the very first words, probably the most famous, except maybe it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. That might be one of the most, call me Ishmael. One of the most famous lines.
How do you pronounce that?
What were you going to say?
So it's Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos.
Lachesis.
They were the daughters of Erebus and Nyx.
Okay, which would be darkness and night.
Is that in Latin? Greek?
I don't know.
Well,
I don't know,
night would
she
be
just
Nox,
translated
and then
one
of
Nyx is
languages
Nyx is
Latin for
snow,
yeah.
but it was
And
night.
snow declines really weird with the V.
Yeah, it does. The genitive
Because it's
Nyx.
saying,
Oh, we had a discussion
Okay,
about,
wait, whoa, we have to come back to Moby Dick. But say
we
what
had
you
a
were going to say.
discussion about water.
Finish he's going to finish his fates, and then we're going to go back to Ishmael.
so it says, as the three sisters of fate, Lachesis, Atropos, and Clotho determine the fates of every mortal, god, and titan. Clotho weave the threads of fate beginning all life. So Clotho
Okay.
was the one.
So they
Clotho's
could just kill whoever they want.
Oh yeah, they could just go in
Even
there.
like say Jupiter or
Except that so Greek mythology for us is not really just one book. You know, it's gathered from different poems and sources. The idea seems to be that often they talk about fate. Fate, and sometimes they call it a goddess, and sometimes they call it a force, but it seems to be something that, like, Zeus can't bucket. The Olympian gods can't buck fate. It controls everything. And so you have poor Oedipus that I was talking about, and our friend Sophocles who wrote about him, this is going to happen. You will kill your father and marry your mother. Good luck with that. Anything you do will just make it happen because fate rules it all. Does that kind of make sense? And so I get the idea that the fates, those sisters, have a controlling, like there's something even higher than them that doesn't even have a name, but they couldn't just get ticked off one day and say, we're just going to off a bunch of people today and get the scissors out and go crazy, or Jupiter or whatever. They couldn't just do that because they were also under orders themselves. But that's where Greek mythology gets a little fuzzy. This is where the Greeks are trying, like, there must be a power that controls everything, but we can't quite understand what that might be.
Because
It's God.
none of their gods have the quality of perfection.
Yes. That none of them have all the power.
So it's
Does
like,
that kind of make sense? So I don't think they had the power to just run around killing people
Technically,
willy-nilly.
like, the thought behind it is that they would be able to just take the life of whoever they wanted away or give it to anybody, but they really can't.
Because
There's a higher power.
there's a higher power that orders all
are
things.
they under fate themselves?
Perhaps they are under fate themselves.
They're technically immortal.
But so they are
Under
the
fate
fates, but
themselves
they're like
to
the fate
fate
secretaries or
fate.
something. Okay, so I got to
Secretary.
thinking, we're going back to
Maybe the
Ishmael now.
secretary is a phase for all of humanity.
There's a funny Far Side. Are you familiar with the Far Side cartoon?
Diary of Wimpy Kid?
Oh, what kind of education are you guys being given? Okay,
The
so,
homeschool.
okay, you have to look up, Google Gary Larson, The Far Side. He's the funniest cartoonist ever on the planet. But don't do it now, Jacob. Listen to me now.
He's gonna forget.
And so he writes really offbeat. There's always just one panel. And there's this one, it has this old guy and he's hunched over a desk. And he has all these lines written, call me Fred, call me Joe, call me Tony, call me Ralph, call me. And he's got a line through each one of them until he gets to call me Ishmael, because he's like trying to find a good name. Anyway, I got to thinking about two things about this line. It's only 3 words. Like, how much can she get out of 3 words? First of all, who is Ishmael? Not this Ishmael. What is Ishmael? What Ishmael do you know?
The Bible.
The stepbrother of Isaac would be older than him. Would be the son of Abraham and Rebecca's servant girl, Hagar.
And so, and Ishmael doesn't get the promise. And
Sad.
Ishmael gets sent away when Isaac shows up. And just look this up, but I can't remember what chapter it was.
Because
Probably
Abraham.
Genesis 12.
Well, I know it's, Genesis 12 is too early. Abraham and Lot part. Okay, just a second. Let me get to, okay, here we go. The Lord's angel said to her, Hagar, you are now pregnant and shall bear a son, and you shall name him Ishmael. My footnote says it means God has heard. For the Lord has heeded your affliction. He shall be a wild ass of a man, his hand against everyone. Sorry, I'm reading the Bible.
That means we can too.
And everyone's hand against him. His hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. Who, by the way, just as an offshoot, who are the descendants of Ishmael?
The Arabs.
The Arabs.
The Ishmael.
Which explains why the Jews and the Arabs are always fighting each other. They're actually half brothers. Okay,
What?
The Jews.
but so
Yeah,
Ishmael.
Yeah, because it is in the Bible during the story of Joseph.
Yeah,
go
they
back
were
to the
Ishmaelite traders.
Yeah, the Ishmaelite traders.
Bought Joseph.
Wait, so I was right? Kind of?
Yeah, in a sense you were right, but the answer she was looking for is Arabs.
Okay,
But now I'm
so
thinking, what would happen if Esau was the one to be given the promise instead of Isaac?
it was Jacob.
Yeah, Jacob stealing it. Would
not
all
I know,
would all
but-
the Jews be really buff?
But it wouldn't, because it was foretold in the womb. Isaac just chose to overlook it. I think Jacob gets a bad rap sometimes. Anyway, that's not what we're
I
talking
do.
about today. So,
I do.
but we're just, another day. Ishmael. He has named his main character after an outcast whose hand is against every man. Okay, now, here's the other thing I want to think about. If I come up to you and I say, call me Michelle, what sort of things does that imply? What can you read into that? Why would I say those words, call me Michelle?
Because you might have a different real name. It's
Okay,
like
I'm
normally-
hiding my real name. This is my name, but you can call me Michelle. Okay, what if I say call me Michelle instead of call me Mrs. Ferguson? What am I implying?
You're implying that it's more open and friendly, that it's not a very...
Yeah, and you guys also might be in a closer relationship too.
Okay,
It depends, do I get
You're
to
on
say
more
Obama
friendly
after?
terms.
okay, just a second, I didn't hear what you said.
It depends if I get to say Obama after. Michelle Obama.
It's
I
kind
don't
of
care.
like,
I'm not gonna answer to that.
it's kind of
Um,
the deal with like Emma, where it's like,
How-
she calls
Yes.
him Knightley? What?
Yes, but he says, call me Ishmael. Now, does that mean because he wants to have an informal relationship with us? Does that mean he's hiding something? My name is really, but you can call me Ishmael. We don't know. But we meet him and we know from the title, something is looming over Ishmael. And a fate is being designed. Now, he says, some years ago. Okay, so the Ishmael that's writing this story is telling us that something that happened several years ago.
This implies that he's alive.
This implies, A, that he's alive, B, that he's going to tell a story about himself. So imagine you were telling me a story about your childhood, and you told me events that happened at that time. Now, there would be two yous, if you see what I mean. One would be the you in the story, like the little, like if I had a birthday party for my 6th birthday. And so if I told you about my 6th birthday party, which don't worry, I'm not going to do, there would be little 6-year-old Michelle in the party, and there would be 54-year-old Michelle telling you about something that happened almost 50 years ago with my perspective.
So
And thinking about how much trouble this was for my parents and looking. So do you see what I mean? There's an Ishmael character, and he's going to tell us this happened and this happened, this happened. But then there's the Ishmael now who can look back and say, oh, I see the significance of that now.
the narrator.
The narrator Ishmael. Does that make sense? And sometimes it's going to be hard to tell. Like, did he know this when it was happening? Or does he just know this now? We don't know. But we meet Ishmael, and he's having, well, do you guys remember? What is Ishmael's state? Why has he decided to join a whaling voyage?
Sorry, you go
You
ahead.
go.
You go.
You go.
He's
Oh
ambitious.
my gosh, somebody go.
Did somebody say you
If
go?
if I remember correctly, it's because he's. I interpret it as essentially he was bored with life.
Okay.
He's bored.
Yeah, he says, whenever I find myself, is that what you were going to say, Gabby?
I was gonna say that he was restless.
Restless, okay, which kind of go together. When you get bored, you get a little restless. He says, whenever I find myself growing grim about the mouth, whenever it is a damp, drizzly November in my soul, whenever I find myself involuntarily pausing before coffin warehouses and bringing up the rear of every funeral I meet, who's brooding on death, and especially whenever my hypos, in other words, his, like, hypochondria, the blues, depression, get the upper hand of me, that it requires a strong moral principle to prevent me from deliberately stepping into the street and methodically knocking people's hats off.
I love that part.
Then I account it high time to get to sea as soon as I can. All right. A man whose hand is against every other man. He wants to go out and just be rude. He's depressed, he's restless, he's brooding on death, and he just wants to go out and be socially rude to people.
Okay.
Just because. It's time to get out and go to sea for a while.
You can knock some heads.
I'll knock your hat off.
Geez, don't you wish you could do that to your siblings every once in a while? Walk up to them.
Just
Oh,
knock
you-
their hats off.
You have
Um,
no idea.
If only my brother
My
wore
family
hats.
has gone through 3 couches already because of me.
What are you doing to the couches?
It's more or less what
Do you
my
jump on them?
siblings do. I don't jump on them.
No
My
more
siblings-
monkeys jumping on the couch.
My
Woman's
siblings get
broken,
thrown onto them.
broken.
Oh, okay.
Because,
Oh, that must be great fun, though.
oh, it's fun until I have to be the one to buy a new couch.
Oh, well, there you go. Let me ask you something. There is another personage that wanted to run away from something and went to sea.
Jonah.
Oh, Joe.
Jonah.
Okay, when in the chapter where they're about to go to church, who saw the message on Jonah coming? I was like, they're going to church, 100% they're going to read
They're
Jonah.
going to
It's
talk
like,
about Jonah.
why would they not?
Jonah ran away. Ishmael is running away. Now, they're not running away from the same thing. Maybe not the same thing. We'll revisit that. So he just heads to the New England coast and shows up, and then he has this very long thing about water. I loved this. Doesn't everybody like to play in the water? Oh, you don't like to play in the water. Like kids stomp in puddles,
So
and
long as
people
it's
go to the
warm water,
seaside,
not cold
and he goes on about all these things that you know, we go to Niagara Falls because it's cool, because it's so much water.
It's like if it were a mountain of mud, no one would care.
Yeah, and then
I would
A
care.
waterfall.
I would have a blast.
If
I'm
it
out
was
in
a
mud.
waterfall of mud, it'd be like.
he says, why did the Greeks give it a separate deity? and own brother of Jove, Poseidon, or Neptune.
Poseidon.
Surely all this is not without meaning, and still the deeper meaning of that story of Narcissus, who, because he could not grasp the tormenting mild image he saw in the fountain, plunged into it and was drowned. But that same image we ourselves see in all rivers and oceans. It is the image of the ungraspable phantom of life, and this is the key to it all. Water is the key to it all? The ungraspable phantom of life? That desire for something that we can't ever get, like Narcissus? He wanted himself, but it was his own reflection.
It's weird.
What do you think?
Fun
You got anything to add? I mean, here's what we're doing. This sounds like a joke, but it's not. We're fishing. We're fishing, even though this is a book about whaling. We're fishing for,
Answers.
what is this man doing in this book? And he's leaving us clues, like Hansel and Gretel follow the breadcrumbs. He's leaving us clues. And if he says this is the key to it all, I feel like I want to know what Ishmael means by, what is it that we all want? We all want something we can't have? We all want escape? I don't know.
How many chapters are we doing this week?
You know
A little
what?
premature,
In the
but-
future, could you ask that at the end of class?
Okay.
I will tell you right now, but this is not the time to ask that question.
Okay.
22 through 47. Herman Melville and Ishmael live in New England. And New England was settled by whom? Who were the first Europeans to come?
Christopher Columbus.
No, he didn't settle. And he didn't even go to New England. He went south, yes.
The Puritans.
The Puritans. The Puritans. What do you know about Puritans?
They pure.
They're pure.
They pure. Okay. They wanted to purify religion.
They're tinged.
Shining city on the hill, kind of.
Shining city on the hill. And they were of a Calvinist persuasion. John Calvin had a couple of, a very developed theology. But the things we most associate with him are, one, total depravity. People are utterly corrupt. There is no vestige of good left in you.
He's wrong.
What?
He's wrong.
Thing two, predestination. God has already chosen everyone who's going to be saved, and you're in one group or the other, and there's nothing you can do about that.
Frozen chosen.
And third, that we really have no free will. Like everything is already planned, and it's going to happen no matter what we do.
It's one of those weird
Well,
things that with God.
I mean, he wasn't a fatalist.
No, but
it was that we don't have free will to choose God.
we
Either
don't have
God
free will to
chooses
choose
you or-
God. Yes,
God either chooses
but
you or he doesn't.
but even they might take it so far as to say that even after salvation, even after justification, we'll say that still God just works everything in you, which is true, but it's only half true. It's like God's not using me as a robot to do His will.
And then you
I
have-
get to cooperate, but He is using me. Do you see what I mean? Like both are true. But Matthew is correct in that his main thrust was that we have no power to choose God. But we have no power to choose anything good whatsoever in a fallen state because of total depravity. All right? This is Puritan theology. This is what New Englanders, Presbyterian New Englanders, and Ishmael calls himself a good Presbyterian over and over, right?
Well,
this is their
not so much
theology.
later in
I
the
don't know.
book.
No, not so much later.
I love his
Except with pre-K.
theological reasoning of, well, I know what the first commandment says, but God says for us to love our neighbor, and we can love our neighbor by getting along with him. Therefore, I should worship
Jojo. Yeah. So he heads out to go whaling, but he says this. This is still in the chapter loomings. We're still in chapter 1. Oh my gosh. No, we're going to move faster later. And doubtless, my going on this whaling voyage formed part of the grand program of providence that was drawn up a long time ago. In other words, it's destiny. I mean, we can call it providence, but call it by the other name, it's fate. providence and fate aren't the same. I don't want, I think you know where I'm going with this, though. It's been planned beforehand. The fates, it's been loomed, right? And then on that same page, down below, he says, though I cannot tell why it was exactly that those stage managers, the fates, put me down for this shabby part of a whaling voyage, when others were set down for magnificent parts in high tragedies, and short and easy parts in genteel comedies, and jolly parts in farces. Though I cannot tell why this was exactly, yet now that I recall all the circumstances, he's looking back, I think I can see a little into the springs and motives which, being cunningly presented to me under various disguises, induced me to set about performing the part I did, besides cajoling me into the delusion that it was a choice resulting from my own unbiased free will and discriminating judgment. We have two Ishmaels here again. The one Ishmael is just going to sea because he wants to. The older Ishmael writing the story down is like, oh, it was all planned. And you know what? All that stuff that made me feel like I was choosing to go to sea, they were just instruments to get me to go to sea, because that was the plan. This was destined for me. All right. So he goes to New Bedford, and he wants to take a boat out to Nantucket Island, and he, again, loomings. He goes to an inn. Who's the guy who runs the inn? Do you remember his name? The Spouter Inn. He looks up at the sign. You know, they have those signs, those wooden signs hanging out. The Spouter Inn, Peter Coffin. First guy he meets, his name is Coffin. Well, that's encouraging.
Also, didn't he stand there and look at a painting of a ship that was
Yes,
being...
he went in and there was a painting, and it took him forever to figure out what in the world it was, because it was like a black blob, and then it was little things sticking up, and he decided that it was a ship being crushed and, you know, by a whale, and the whale was swimming over it or leaping over it or something. That's not a good sign either. You don't want that to happen. I don't know a lot about whaling, but you don't want that to happen.
Obviously,
sure.
whoever drew that picture is not a very good artist.
Well, or maybe it was impressionist.
When I went to Mexico, we went on kind of like a little cruise to a private island, and there was whales when we were going there, and there was like 3 around us. There was 1 behind us and 2 on the side.
Wow.
And I saw one of the tails on, and I'm like, holy cow, that is big.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see what would happen, because he stuck his tail out and he left it up there. So I picked up a tiny rock, because he was like 10 feet away from the boat.
Wow.
I tossed it over, literally, I kid you not. Nobody believes me when I say this. I tossed it, he moved his tail and literally smacked, he obviously didn't mean to do this. He hits the rock right back at me and dents the boat. I kid you not.
It was a message.
I almost had a David and Goliath moment.
I feel like it was only in reverse.
Yeah. And then we went scuba diving.
Wheel load, use counter.
Outside of Peter Coffin's Spouter Inn, there is a very strange discussion. I feel like whenever Ishmael starts talking about something weird, I should pay attention. Like, okay, Ishmael's up, something's up with him. And he says, he's talking about Euroclydon, which is the north wind, all right? And how it feels better when you're inside, but not so good when you're outside, which, with the weather the way it's been, you know how it's kind of nice to hear the wind blow when you're inside, toasty warm with your cocoa, but if you're outside, it's not so good. And he says, in judging of the tempestuous wind called Euroclydon, says an old writer, of whose works I possess the only copy extant. What? Ishmael owns a book that there's only 1 copy of in the world? Where did he get that? And then he goes on to talk about it makes a big difference whether you're looking at it from the outside or the inside. And he says, or whether you're looking at it when the frost is on both sides, and of which the white death is the only glazier. Like being outside is death, and being inside is life.
Like,
Ishmael, what in the world are you talking about?
if you're in the middle of a snowstorm, that's a problem.
That
If you're
is.
inside, the snow is really pretty.
And then he comments, and I'm not totally sure if this is really happening or not, because he starts talking about Lazarus. Not Lazarus from the tomb, but Lazarus the poor man. You know, the rich man and Lazarus, that parable. He says, poor Lazarus there, chattering his teeth against the curbstone for his pillow, and shaking off his tatters with his shiverings. He might plug up both ears with rags, and put a corn cob into his mouth, and yet that would not keep out the tempestuous Euroclydon. Apparently there's a beggar, a homeless man outside of the Spouter Inn, sleeping on the curbside. Old Lazarus there. He's out in the weather. This is December. What would you think that if you were running an inn and you saw some poor homeless person shivering and cold out in the bad weather, what might you do?
Ask him to pay to get inside.
Okay, well, ask him to come inside. Maybe if you were nice at all, you might just have him come in and give him a hot drink and not make him pay.
I would just pick up Snowball and throw it on him.
Peter Coffin, however, does no such thing. He's full up, and yeah, Ishmael's going to have to sleep with Queequeg.
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 Queequeg on the front of your book?
It says, okay, I'll tell you what it says on the back. Oh no, it doesn't say it on the back, it says it on the inside page. Life mask taken of Chief Tapua Te Wanoa of the Ngati Wakoi Hapu of the Rotorua region. It's in a New Zealand museum, showing the full facial Mako design produced with a small bone adze dipped in liquid charcoal, 1854. So yes, maybe this is supposed to be reminiscent of Queequeg. What is Queequeg's story?
Prince.
Pagan.
Okay, he's pagan, and he's a prince.
Cannibal too.
And a cannibal. And what, why is he a whaler? Like, why did he go sailing?
Because he's a good shot.
Okay, because he's a good shot. Do you remember?
Because he wanted to see. Well, the sailors said, like, the captain of the ship let him on his ship when, like, first he left the island which he was the prince from. It's like, oh, someone who wants to see the Christian lands are all Christian and so well, I should totally let on my ship.
Yes.
But I think but it's kind of implied he wanted to go to actually see the world and everything, but he wasn't with, like, the captain, but instead he slept with those sailors, and he learned the trade.
So he's good at it.
But in his travels, this is in the chapter called Biographical, he's telling a story. At bottom, so he told me, he was actuated by a profound desire to learn among the Christians the arts whereby to make his people still happier than they were, and more than that, still better than they were. But alas, the practices of whalemen soon convinced him that even Christians could be both miserable and wicked, infinitely more so than all his father's heathens. Arrived at last in Old Sag Harbor, and seeing what the sailors did there, and then going on to Nantucket, and seeing how they spent their wages in that place also, poor Queequeg gave it up for lost. Thought he, it's a wicked world in all meridians. I'll die a pagan. Christians have let him down. How did you see Queequeg ever being more Christian than some Christians? In your reading? There was one particular incident.
When they're going over to Nakata Island, and the one guy fell off the boat, Queequeg risked his life to get, like, the mast back together, and then jumped into the water and dived down for the one.
Yeah. The one who had just been making fun of him. One of a group of kids, young men, whatever, who had been mocking him. He rescued the boat, and then dove in and rescued the offender. And at that point, Ishmael kind of has a turning. Ishmael, who describes himself as the good Presbyterian, New England Presbyterian, what does he decide religiously in this section? What?
He ain't so good after all.
Yeah.
Well,
Also, what else?
later when he's talking to the captain of the Pequod ship, when he's asking, is this guy what was it, Quahog? They call
Yeah,
him?
Quahog.
Quahog, is he a Christian? And he's like, they try to convince him that it's from like the first Congregational Church or whatever, and they're like, but I've never seen him there before, and I go there, and essentially he switches to, aren't we all part of this one big, as he called it, like one big Catholic Church, universal, that we all worship in? It's very high and lofty, and then the captain, I forgot which one, because there's 3 captains of the ship, said like, that's the best sermon I've ever heard.
Yeah, Ishmael comes to see, you know what, paganism has something to say for it, maybe. And sometimes Christianity doesn't. So let's look at some fine, upstanding Christian people in the community. First of all, Peter Coffin, who leaves the shivering guy outside. Mrs. Hussey, she's the one who runs the inn on Nantucket Island. Do you remember? She doesn't want people to take their harpoons up to the rooms. Why not?
So they can't commit suicide?
Can't commit suicide. Does she care whether or not they commit suicide?
No.
No, she cares whether they mess up her reputation and dirty her room with it. And then later, she doesn't want to knock down the door. You know, when he's it was it'll break my door. I'll have to pay for it. Okay, don't you care that a guy may be dead in there? No, not really. I care about my door.
Well, she could just, I mean, if she's the owner, she probably has a key.
Yeah.
Yes, you would think so.
But she had the one key she tried. But back then, there was usually only one key to a door, unlike today, where it's like hotels where you can just swipe it.
Yes.
There was no master key back then.
So we already see some examples in the early chapters of people not behaving Christianly. Let's look at a couple of more, but I want to look at the sermon. You talked about going to the sermon, and you saw Jonah coming down the pike. He went to the church service. And what is the first thing that greets you when you enter this chapel? Go ahead.
You go.
The Lord Jesus.
No.
Himself in the flesh.
The death.
Thank you.
Paper? No, it was like the notices. It was
Yes.
I took it as like little plaques.
Yeah, they were
something.
plaques. They were plaques, like stone or wooden plaques inscribed with the epitaphs, basically, of people who had died at sea, died whaling. This is not encouraging. Again, he's got all these things looming over him, right? Like Peter Coffin. He goes to Mrs. Hussey's, and he describes the sign at her place like a gallows. It looks like a gallows set up. And then he goes to the chapel, and we have a bunch of deaths. He sees the painting with the ship foundering, and then he goes and sits in on this sermon. What is Father Mapple's point about Jonah?
Basically, we can't run away from God.
Okay, you can't run away. And when we do run away, what do you need to do?
Get eaten by a whale.
True repentance.
Repent. He keeps talking about that. This, shipmates, is that other lesson, and woe to the pilot of the living God who slights it. Woe to him whom this world charms from gospel duty. Woe to him who seeks to pour oil upon the waters when God has brewed them into a gale. Woe to him who seeks to please rather than to appall. Woe to him, listen to this line, woe to him who would not be true, even though to be false were salvation. Woe to him who would not be true, which means be false, even though being false were salvation. Being false is never salvation. Lying is never a good idea. And he says, "O shipmates, on the starboard hand of every woe there is sure delight, and higher the top of that delight, then the bottom of the woe is deep. And if you repent, you can come to that. But listen to his idea of repentance. Delight is to him whose strong arms yet support him when the ship of this base, treacherous world has gone down beneath him. Delight is to him who gives no quarter in the truth and kills, burns, and destroys all sin, though he pluck it out from under the robes of senators and judges. He's got kind of a violent, remember, he's thundering this out, shouting from his big pulpit that looks like the prow of a ship. Kill, burn, and destroy sin. All right, in ourselves, yes, but he doesn't say in yourself. He just kill, burn, and destroy sin. It's kind of a rough gospel message. Yes?
This has me worried. I just flipped into a random page, and the first thing I see is the name of the chapter that says, "Of the Monsters, Pictures of Whales."
Good luck. You can't wait till you get to that chapter, can you? It's the best chapter in the book. I'm making that up. Okay, so I want to note something. So it's a rather rowdy, sort of fire and brimstone, sort of not message, but delivery. You know what I mean? Very, very energetic.
Also, something I found kind of funny is that he read a lot of things into the text that weren't there.
Yes.
Like how it was this is like the first recorded instances of smuggling, and like he was literally reading into Jonah's mind, and here was the words he was thinking.
Yes.
He was describing, like, man, that's really painting a picture.
And he reads into it, something he reads into it, which I want to point out, is very early he's telling the story back, and so he's picturing Jonah goes down to the sea, and he wants to get on the ship. And, of course, the captain, I don't know that it says this in the book of Jonah, that they were suspicious of him at all, but it seemed, he just shows up, and he has no luggage or whatever, and he just wants to get on the ship where you want to go, as far away as I possibly can. And of course, we do know in the book of Jonah that later when the storm comes up, like, this guy maybe, he must be a murderer. He must be trying to escape from something. And so, but the Father Mapple, he reads a bunch of it into it. And he has how, Jack, he's robbed a widow. Or Joe, do you mark him? He's a bigamist. Or it goes on and on. They're speculating on who he is, what he did wrong. And then it says, he says, I seek a passage in the ship to Tarshish. How soon sail ye, sir? And let me get back. Okay. Now, Jonah's captain, shipmates, was one whose discernment detects crime in any, but whose cupidity, greed, exposes it only in the penniless. In other words, he sees everybody as a wrongdoer, but if you got enough money, he'll overlook it. In this world, shipmates, sin that pays its way can travel freely and without a passport. Okay. So it goes on. Yet when Jonah fairly takes out his purse, prudent suspicions still molest the captain. He rings every coin to find a counterfeit. And it says, I skipped a line. He charges him thrice the usual sum, and it's assented to. In other words, in Father Mapple's retelling, the captain, like, this guy's kind of suspicious. I'm gonna super overcharge him, see if he'll still go. And if he does, he might still be suspicious, but at least I'll have money in my pocket. What happens when Ishmael goes to sign on board the Pequod? What does Bildad do?
He tries to give him the 777th leg, which is like...
He tries to gyp him. Just like Father Mapple described Jonah being gypped. And it's so disturbing. Did you notice what Bildad was reading out of the Bible while this was going on?
John 3:16.
Let's see if I can find it. He was signing up. Oh. Okay, that's Crow Hog His Mark.
I never remember the reference. What is it?
Okay, okay, here we go. Old Bildad, to my no surprise, considering that he was such an interested party in these proceedings about how much money to give Ishmael. Bildad never heeded us, but went on mumbling to himself out of his book, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth..." "Well, Captain Bildad," replied Peleg, "what do you say? What do you say we should give this young man?" And then they picked the 777th, and then 777th, again said Bildad, without lifting his eyes, and then went on mumbling, "For where your treasure is, that will your heart be also." He's going to spare Ishmael the burden of having too much money, the burden of having too much treasure on earth. He'll take the burden on himself. He'll take the money. What? Just like the captain, Father Mapple's captain to Jonah, Ishmael's getting rooked out of his proper share, which he already had said, maybe a 300th, 200th, something, since he didn't have whaling practice, 777th? 1 out of 777th part? No. That's really bad. He said something like, I might be able to, like it might make up for the clothes I'm going to wear out on the voyage and the food I'm going to eat. I might break even. Yeah, for several years of being out there.
Yeah.
Bildad.
Isn't it though free? It's pretty much you get paid, but you don't get paid a whole lot because you get free room and board while you're on the ship.
Well, this is true. You don't go on a whaling voyage to become rich, although if you had a really good haul over several years, you might come out with a pretty penny. But yes, room and board is part of the deal. Of course, the board is in a hammock in a room with a bunch of other smelly guys, and the food is probably somewhat lacking, like hardtack and salted pork.
How do they keep water for 3 years? Like, having water?
Stopping in at ports.
Oh, stopping at ports, okay.
So they wouldn't necessarily be out in the open ocean
That's what
for
I was
3
wondering.
years.
Like, there's no way they could be out there for 3 years without having anything ever going back.
Like the whaling ship that stopped wherever Queequeg was living. They stopped to gather supplies and stuff, and maybe some fresh fruit, whatever, and then go on. But
Well, I mean,
they wouldn't be able to.
They could do it, just wouldn't be
Grab
great.
you too.
I mean, they could collect rainwater and
They might be out on the sea for like several months at a time.
they would be like malnourished because they're not getting vitamins from like vegetables and stuff.
Scurvy.
This is true. Scurvy. Makes me want to say scurvy dog. Makes me want to do piratey talk when I say scurvy. What kind of a Christian at heart is Bildad? He's very religious. He's reading his Bible all the time. But is he above cheating someone out of what is their due?
Apparently not.
Not at all. Not at all. Then there is another not so good sign. The captain of this voyage is going to be a man named Ahab.
The real captain.
The real captain. Yeah, it's because Bildad and Peleg are owners, part owners, and they're fitting it out. They are former captains, but they're not captaining this voyage. But they have a share in the profits of this craft. They know Ahab, and he's like, well, Ahab, he's a pretty decent guy. Talks about some storm off the coast of Africa or off the coast of South America, and he saved people in it. But Ahab got his leg ripped off by a whale last voyage, and he's not been very well.
I mean, that's just minor.
Yeah,
That's
it's just a leg. It's just a
a
leg.
leg.
He's still got one.
I have a question about
He
that.
has one left over.
Yeah.
If your leg got ripped off, where would you feel the pain? Like, would it hurt?
Well, yeah, it would, but it's more of a psychological pain.
Where would you feel the pain though?
You mean when it got ripped off?
Yeah.
I'm guessing in the place where it got separated.
Well, isn't
Like
there
at your
such thing as
hip?
ghost pains?
There
where-
is.
No,
Sometimes people
It's
feel
more
pains
like
in the leg that's missing.
psychological. Like usually people that get a limb ripped off, they feel their limb hurts.
Yes.
But it's actually just in their
But
mind.
there would be
in that
pain
one
in the place
spot
where
that
your
it's
leg
ripped
detached
off.
from your body. Heck, it hurts me when I pull a hangnail. Can't even
It's like,
imagine what it
That's
I
one of
got-
the
my
most
leg got
painful things
ripped
a
off.
human can experience pulling off a hand.
So consider
I
this:
got-
you have nerves traveling all the way
Okay,
through.
well, hold on, Carl. We can't do the nerves thing right now.
I got burned from like a stove element, so
Yes,
it's very
pain,
hot.
okay.
and
So
hot.
let's, because it's almost time, let's go with the pain, let's skip the pain. You can discuss pain over your lunches
Well, it's
if
just 'cause
you want to.
it was quick.
Okay, that's okay, that's okay. It got, I know, it got
It's
added
okay,
too.
we're almost out of
We
time,
all
that's
jumped,
fine.
we all jumped on the whole pain thing, because there was violence involved. We all get excited. Okay, Ahab, yes.
Pain
The
train.
homeless man that was following them whenever they were boarding the ship.
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
Elijah.
okay, because here's what I want to point out.
So
Who is a person named Ahab that you know?
In the Bible.
What's his deal?
King Ahab, he was terrible.
He was terrible. What was terrible about
He
him?
slept with a bunch of people.
No, he
No.
didn't.
Oh no, that was
did
a
His
not.
different
wife
one.
was horrible, and he
That wouldn't
He,
be good. He might have, we don't
he
know.
hated God. He worshipped Balaam.
Baal. His wife Jezebel was a Phoenician princess who was a Baal worshiper. And
Not
these were
very
just,
nice.
and not
So
very
wicked
nice.
That when she died, she was fed to the dogs.
Yes, the dogs licked up her
Wasn't she-
blood in the place where Naboth's blood had been
wasn't
licked up.
she killed by like falling out a window?
Yeah,
or
they threw her
something?
out the window. They threw her down to Jehu. Okay, so anyways, Ahab is a rotter. And who was the primary prophet that challenged Ahab over and over?
Elijah.
Elijah. And here we have Ishmael walking down the street, and this tattered weirdo guy accosts him and says, "Hey, you seen that captain? Hey, did you sign up yet?" "Well, I'm not going to say anything about it, but..."
Sucks.
And then he comes to him again, and his name is Elijah. The prophet Elijah is warning him against Ahab, the evil king of Israel, before he gets on the Pequod.
The
In this
question
case,
is
the
his
evil
name-
lord of the whaling ship.
The evil lord of the whaling ship.
The question
Okay, but we
is-
don't know that he's evil yet. Oh, except for Elijah. Like he's troubled. He's not been well, but if you get your leg ripped off, I can see how you might not be well for a while.
Man, I mean,
Okay.
I think I'd be well.
But he's
This
ready to
dude
go back
sucks.
out, so apparently he's well enough to be manning a ship, and he's going to go back out on a whaling cruise, and that's all we know. But Ahab, just like Ishmael, means something. It's the man whose hand is against all other men. Ahab means something, and Elijah means something. These aren't random. Anyway, I'm going to let you go. We are going to go fishing again this week. But 21 through 30, what did I say? 22 through 47.
47?
Yes, 47. And here's the thing I'd like you to do. If Ishmael, when anything weird gets talked about, make a note of it. If that's your copy of the book, put a little mark in the margin even. Put a question mark. Why is he talking about this?
Sauce.
Because there's probably a reason. And if you see any references that have anything to do with Jonah, now that it's been thrust upon us, he hears the sermon of Jonah, he gets swindled like Jonah in the sermon.
Did he actually take that, or did he renegotiate it?
Well, Peleg
The other
renegotiated. He gave him a 300 and something, and he was
Wasn't it
gonna
275th?
275th. Was that it? Interestingly,
So almost
I
300.
know Queequeg got a really good deal, or at least
90.
so, or at least so the captains claimed.
Like, oh my gosh,
Bildad's trying to,
he's so good.
evangelize Ishmael. Avast there, Bildad, avast now, spoiling our harpooneer. He's trying to evangelize Queequeg. Pious harpooneers never make good voyagers. Takes a shark out of them. No harpooner worth his straw who ain't pretty sharkish. In other words, don't convert this pagan. It'll make him not as good at his job, and we will make less money. By the way, do you know who Peleg and Bildad are?
They're like, not quite captains. Wait, no, they are.
No,
long
I mean in the
masters.
Bible.
Oh.
Those are Bible names. Bildad is one of the advisors of Job. One of Job's
wasn't
advisors
very-
who was not very wise. And Peleg is an early guy, and all it says about Peleg is in his day the world was divided.
So
Does
he's
that
just the
mean
time frame.
does that mean after the Tower of Babel? Does it mean after
mean,
the
the world always
continents
kind of been
split apart,
divided,
which I
so-
believe happened during the flood? Like, I don't know. Anyway, but they're Old Testament figures too. Which, again, Herman Melville, his name's Herman. It's not like people didn't have
Regular.
normal names Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, but he names everybody in this book, except for Queequeg, something, I mean, not everybody, but an awful large percentage of people with obscure biblical names. Reason? I think so. Okay. Read also. Before we go, does anybody need advice or help on your Emma essays that you are currently working on and are due next week? Has everyone managed to choose it? One of the topics that I gave you. Did everybody get those? Because I remember I forgot to bring them last time and I emailed them out. And no help needed in structuring it? We're all good?
Yep.
Okay. See you next week.
I'm doing the comparison on formalities.
That's the one.